Stacey from ExhibitX. We help exhibitors to improve their performance on the event floor. First, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today for another eventful exhibiting episode. This time focuses on having a realistic budget can be the difference between a positive ROI and a disappointing loss. Now, I quite understand if some of you want to miss this episode altogether. Talking about money can be awkward, but I urge you to keep watching. You see, without money, nothing will happen. Money is like a sixth sense, without which you cannot make a complete use of the other five. As an exhibit manager, you have the fiscal responsibility to allocate your resources properly and report results accurately to management, or in some cases, to prove the return on investment to yourself and your co-directors. So the bottom line for your entire exhibit program depends on what you do next. There are two questions to ask yourself. The first question to ask is where your budget is coming from. Is it already set aside in your marketing allocation or coming out of cash flow? Either way, you need to be very careful that you don't overspend. The second question is, how much do you need to spend to accomplish your objectives? At this point, it's tough to create a budget based on a wish list. Although it's likely you'll not have all the resources you need to do everything you want, developing a budget on what you think you need to do the job properly is a good place to start. It forces you to focus on the entire program rather than one aspect of the plan, such as your stand or your promotion. From this, you'll be able to develop a realistic budget to increase resources for all your areas of your exhibit. If the thought of managing a budget turns you cold, don't worry. By the end of this episode, you'll transform any worries you have about what your revenue stream might be and where different types of costs come from. You'll be quietly confident because you'll know how a realistic budget can be the difference between a positive ROI and a disappointing loss. My aim for you by the end of this episode is for you to know a method of calculating your anticipated revenue, the 3 cost centers that could run out of control, how to cut costs without drawing blood, and the 6 areas where most stand managers can save lots of money. You'll also know why preparing to beat Murphy's Law is important. And if you don't know what Murphy's Law is, I'll tell you about that later. You'll also discover the single most important thing to know when cutting costs. I'll also be telling you and sharing with you my success secret. People tell me that sometimes preparing a budget feels as though they're walking on a tightrope, fearing the costs when they should be focusing on the return on investment. I believe costs and ROI should work in partnership together, not compete with each other. So if costs and ROI should work in partnership with each other, it would be helpful to know what items could be included in your budget sheets. Now, to help me explain it clearly, I would like to introduce you to Martin. He's the chap in the middle. Martin is a typical exhibitor and a business owner with 8 members of staff. His purpose for exhibiting is to sell his new online ordering system to the lunchtime takeaway market. He's exhibited before and he says he quite enjoyed the experience but felt disappointed and frustrated by the results, which he described as, at best, the results were mediocre. Even so, there's a part of him that understands how vital exhibiting is to his business. To remain competitive, he knows he needs to embrace exhibiting as part of his business growth strategy. So this time, he's decided to take a larger stand. And Martin, you know, he's typical of thousands of other exhibitors. And this is the first question he asked himself. What should I put on my stand? Like I say to everyone, I'm afraid that's the wrong place to start. If Martin were to start with his objectives, he'd discover how much easier it would be to prepare his budget based on what he is going to need to achieve his objectives. He'd know where to put his time, his energy, and his money. He would know if he asked his ideal customers how they'd like to experience the system. And knowing this, he'd be able to decide what stand assets to use to inspire the right people to say yes from buying from him. However, this is what really happens. Martin is in danger of becoming a magnet to costs. You know, somehow costs seem to know when an exhibitor is ill prepared. They present themselves as must-haves, saying, "Everyone else has one, use me, and you'll stand out from the crowd." As an exhibitor who truly wants to exceed on the event floor, he's naturally attracted to those bright, shiny objects. He's excited by what he sees on other exhibitor stands, and the topic of conversation within his team is all about what should we use as giveaways. Martin had thought of having a video produced, then the ever-popular pull-up banner and pop-up display stands. Now, there's nothing wrong with these. They are in fact brilliant at conveying a message and attracting visitors. But the question he needs to ask is, would using these items attract his ideal customers? And is this the best way of him spending his money? Would investing in these move him towards his goals and a profitable return on investment? What Martin needs to do is to change his thinking. Rather than being a magnet to costs, it would be brilliant if he could become a magnet to ROI. You see, one of the reasons why exhibitors end up feeling disillusioned and disappointed is they start their exhibit marketing planning in the wrong place. Now, I don't know if you've read this book. It's by Stephen Covey, and it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In the book, he says, to begin with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. And to explain that a bit more in exhibit marketing terms, it means you need to know what results you want from your exhibit marketing campaign before you start planning your budget. Knowing this will help you plan better, prepare a realistic budget, and put tactics in place to achieve a good return on investment. For Martin, in this illustration, it was a real eye-opener for him. To start with, he needed to calculate an anticipated revenue stream, and he did this by setting very good objectives with tactics on how to achieve his sale targets. His objective was to sell 10 online ordering systems at £5,000 each within 4 months of the end of the exhibition. His tactics were to demonstrate the system on the stand and follow up with one-to-one meetings where he would provide a free 30-day trial for all interested lunch shops. His anticipated revenue stream was easy to calculate. He simply multiplied 10 systems he wanted to sell by £5,000, and his anticipated revenue was going to be £50,000. And this is the first figure that he and you should put into your budget sheet. By that I mean, what is your anticipated income stream? Next, Martin needed to turn his attention to costs he might incur and to understand how to prevent them from running out of control. These cost centres fall into 3 main categories. The first is the unavoidable costs, and they break down into fixed and variable. The second is the money you choose to spend. And thirdly, there is the money that you end up spending. Now let's just take a few minutes to look at each one in turn. On the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see the tracker table I use for exhibition costs. And in the first category of costs, these are called unavoidable. An unavoidable fixed cost I would describe as a cost you cannot do without. It's a cost that you have no control over. They are costs imposed on you. Costs like the stand itself, any show services such as electricity, carpeting, lights, furniture, night screens, ceiling voiles, amongst a host of other things. One essential tip here is to always check before you book what exactly is included in the price of your exhibition space. The second unavoidable costs, or what I call unavoidable variable costs, are the items that you must have. But you have some control over how much you spend. You can shop around gathering quotes from a range of suppliers, negotiate special rates or package deals. The second cost centre is what you choose to spend. This sounds a bit of a weird title, but it explains the items you feel you need to engage with your audience. Things like champagnes, sweets, or fish bowls for those business cards, branded bags, boxes, pens, notepads, or any other trinkets a visitor can take away with them. Now, this cost centre comes with a big fat warning. It's here that costs can quickly mount up. Rather than wasting money on trinkets, think of a valuable giveaway that directly relates to your irresistible offer and doubles up as the first step in your sales process. The one that helps a potential client feel relief that they've found you. The third cost centre is what you end up spending. This section often has people curious and laughing in some cases. So money I've seen spent in this cost category has been known to exceed the cost of the unavoidable variable costs. Exhibitors tend to end up spending excess money on things like coffee, refreshments, lunch, cakes, biscuits, and other pick-up-and-eat boredom food. Be careful also where you park, because car parking fines and tow-away charges are extraordinarily expensive. With all these cost centres, you'd think there couldn't possibly be another one. Well, I'm sorry to say, yes there is. It's called Plan B. It's time to build in a contingency. I tend to use a percentage of the allowable budget and include it within the budget, not add it to the original budget, because that's cheating. Contingencies are in case the unthinkable happens, like someone forgets the tools needed to assemble your stand and you have to rush out to the nearest DIY store and buy new ones. Having a contingency is important if you're going to manage the totally unexpected costs and beat Murphy's Law. Not sure what Murphy's Law is? Murphy's Law stands for what can go wrong will. And this rule applies to all types of shows, exhibitions and events. And when something goes wrong, you'll pay the highest price possible for repair and replacement. Not only will this cost blow your budget, it will also take its toll on your sanity, your energy and your peace of mind. Having a contingency is really important, as are the means to pay for the contingency when on site. In the tracker table for exhibition costs, you'll have noticed that I've added a cost saving and a percentage change column, because if you're able to save money by ordering ahead or negotiate on price, then you should record that and remind yourself of how much your early actions have already saved. You need to know your costs line by line, so keeping a record on a sheet similar to this one will really help you become an efficient and effective budget planner, especially if you're aware of the areas where you can cut the costs that always appear on your budget sheet. So, how do you cut costs? Let's have a look at how to cut costs without drawing blood. There are 6 areas where it's really easy to save money. The first one is your graphics, photography and design work. The best advice I can give here is to work within an existing campaign. Don't reinvent the wheel. Use current designs that are already resonating with your audience. The second one is about literature, brochures and flyers. Instead of opting for full colour print, could you use black and white? How about choosing a lower grade paper and use standard sizes of paper and envelopes? The third one is about stand enhancements and decor. Flowers and plants add warmth to an exhibit, so rather than use real ones, which can be rather expensive, try using silk and artificial ones and reuse them. Next in my cost-saving ideas is about staffing for your stand and your back office support. Make sure you choose the right staff, people who are experienced at selling and most importantly experienced at selling what you offer. Don't send the most junior person unless of course it's part of their induction or training program, because it's likely they will buckle under the pressure. The fifth on my list is about show services from the organisers. Always, always, always read the exhibitor's handbook as soon as it arrives. It contains all the details you'll need to book exhibition stand extras, and there could be deadlines for ordering. If you don't keep, you could be paying dearly for late penalty charges. And finally, how to make your printer happy. This tip is really easy to understand. You order more items than you need, you give away less than you thought, and you throw away the rest. I've seen exhibitors order hundreds or thousands of these glossy, elaborate brochures and give them away randomly at visitors. Doing this is such a waste of time, effort, and money. This brings me really neatly to the single most important thing to know when cutting costs, and that is always cut what the customer cannot see. Now, what do I mean by that? It's far better that you choose a less expensive hotel or share travel arrangements than it is to scrimp on the way you will engage with your audience. Why do I say this? Because first impressions really do count, and you want your potential customers to remember you for all the right reasons, don't you? And finally, I'm going to give you my success secret. It's my profitability mantra, and that mantra is: your fortune is in the follow-up. And why do I say that? Well, it's here where all your hard work comes together. It's where you turn those exhibition leads into big juicy sales with profitable results. And it's perfectly possible to do this if you have an efficient, effective and robust follow-up process in place. So in this episode, I've explained quite a few things about budgets, recording revenue streams and the different types of costs to add to your budget tracker. Now it's time to recap on what you've learned. You know how to calculate an anticipated revenue stream. You know the 3 cost centres that could run out of control. You also know how to cut costs without drawing blood and the 6 ways to stop that happening. You know what to do to beat Murphy's Law. And the single most important thing when cutting costs is, all together, always cut what the customer cannot see. Well, we've come to the end of this episode on how having a realistic budget can be the difference between a positive ROI and a disappointing loss. And before I go, I'd like to thank you for your time and to wish you every success on the event floor. Have an eventful show, and I'll see you next time.